Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I interview founders, entrepreneurs, executives, thought leaders, artists, you name it, across the world of crypto and blockchain. And I have an amazing guest today. I say all my guests are amazing, but I've seen a video of this podcast of this man's interview, one of them, and he's actually amazing. So it's going to be a treat. So I look forward to introducing him. He is the founder of Pixels. His name is Luke Barwikowski. Luke, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for the kind words, man. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. So I'm interested in finding out, about ask everybody about their background and is it logical, but I'm ask you a different question. I want to find out more about your unique entrepreneurial journey and the personal story behind the creation of Pixels.
Yeah, more than happy to share that. I mean, yeah, it's funny because this is like a very personal journey, anybody's journey into entrepreneurship. And yeah, I've been working full time on startups for over 4 years now, which is kind of crazy. My story is basically I started coding when I was 12 years old. I taught myself how to make games, and I started kind of coding in secret for all of my like high school life. And I knew I was going to go into coding before I even graduated high school. And I decided to go to the University of Michigan to study computer science. When I was there, I also started taking some economics classes and really fell in love with it and started working towards a dual degree in computer science and economics. But then when I was at university, I kind of flirted with dropping out basically every single year. I started working at startups at the very beginning of my freshman year of college full time. And yeah, I kind of fell in love with that environment. And then I had full-time job offers after my first year of university, but luckily I didn't take them because I think it was really good that I stuck with going through university. But then, yeah, I graduated from the University of Michigan, got my degrees, and then went out into the real world, become a software engineer at a company called Workday. I worked there for about a year and a half, and I always kind of had the intention of quitting after a year and a half. Basically, I went into this job thinking I'm going to go there, I'm going to save up a little bit of money, and then I'm going to go and try to do my own thing. And yeah, a year and a half came, and essentially what I did was I quit that job. I simultaneously moved to New Zealand, and I spent the next like year and a half traveling and building out the early stages of what eventually became Pixels. And yeah, the actual company that became Pixels, I started when I was living in New Zealand. Essentially, COVID happened when I was in New Zealand. I got locked down there in like the west coast of the new South Island, which is the most remote part. I rented a cabin for like the entire time there, and I was just alone by myself, basically coding. And I came out with like this really interesting new thing. It wasn't Web3, it wasn't gaming at the time. It was one of the first applications of this new technology called spatial video chat, where essentially it was like a mix of Zoom, an online game. You could walk around and chat with people. If you walk too far away, it would start video chats with other people. And yeah, I tried building a business around that for a little bit. It didn't end up working out. But yeah, as I was basically shutting down that previous business and trying to figure out what I was going to do next, I started pivoting and trying other ideas. And this was about like August or September 2021. And yeah, I was basically thinking my journey as an entrepreneur was over at that time. But I had like a little bit of runway left with that previous business. So I figured I might as well just try some things. And I basically sat down in the cabin again for another like month. And I tried like 30 different business ideas over that month period. And one of the things that I tried experimenting with was basically integrating NFTs into this previous product that I had. And that was the first time that basically anything I had built had gotten attention from the outside world. And it just gave me some interesting conviction. I started digging into the use case a bit more. I saw that there were all these NFT collections out there that had pretty strong communities, but nothing to do inside of their community. And it seemed like an interesting go-to-market strategy to build something in this space that took advantage of that. And that became the foundation of Pixels. Yeah, we like really shortly after that raised like a pre-seed round from Animoca Brands. I got to go out and develop the game even further, build a bigger team. And yeah, we started the journey of basically building in public, trying to figure out like what exactly in Web3 would work, what would stick. And yeah, we've landed here now, which is pretty cool. It's been a long journey.
August 2021, September 2021 was was right when the NFTs were starting to take off.
Yep.
Right. A lot of those companies who built with NFTs are no longer here.
Yeah.
You are, which is great. What was the key to your success being here?
Yeah, I think that startup mindset from before and that really scrappy mindset from before was extremely helpful. Like I didn't start in Web3, so I came into Web3 with basically the mindset that I don't know what works here, and I want to try to find what I deem product market fit. And that requires a lot of iteration, not acting like you have the answers, rather going out and kind of truth seeking or trying to find the answers. And I think that helps because I think a lot of the assumptions I had about Web3 really early on were very wrong. But I came in with an open mind to be wrong. And if things that I thought about Web3 that I assumed were truths really early on turned out to be wrong, like for a clear, concrete example was when I first heard about Web3 gaming, I thought the idea of full decentralization was amazing. I thought it was so cool. And I thought, you need every single thing on chain inside of a Web3 game for it to actually work and to unlock the full value of it. And we did that at first. And then we realized nobody actually cares about that. Um, and when we started to move past what we thought was right and what actually worked, I think that was kind of a difference maker for us. So yeah, it requires a really agile team and it requires like some humility of understanding that your ideas might not be the right ones and really what you're supposed to be doing is going out and finding the things that work. And yeah, I think those two things together helped a lot.
That makes sense. It's fail. It's fail until you and fail fast, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. Cool. So Pixels. What is Pixels all about, and how you believe it is the gateway for millions into Web3?
Yeah, so Pixels is a social casual game, and we've done a lot of work on figuring out what are interesting things about Web3 that actually might make the gaming experience better. And those things aren't so obvious. But we've done a lot of work to figure out some of the things that our users really resonate with. And if you come into the game, it's a very casual experience early on. There's a lot of work that we can do. If you start to play the game for the first time, there's not a lot of polish. There's things that don't necessarily make sense. And that hasn't really been a priority for us. What we've been trying to figure out is we want to build with a core audience who understands what the mission is. And we've been doing our build process in public too. So if you come into the gaming community, you'll see there's so many diehard fans of what we're doing because we've been basically building for them and not really for a mass market audience, even though we've onboarded millions of users already at this point. There's still so much we can do still too. But yeah, the game, if you haven't played it, it feels kind of like if Stardew Valley was an MMO. And then what we do is we do a lot of experimentation around incentivization, interoperability, social fi. We've been basically trying to mash all these different Web3 primitives into one experience that makes a cohesive vision into a game. So yeah, one of the like interesting hooks that you'll see inside the game that kind of makes people understand Web3 right away is when you come into the game, you'll notice there's so many different avatars that you can walk around as, and those are actually NFTs that people own. So essentially, if you own an NFT that we didn't create, you could actually use it inside of our game as your avatar. And we support over 100 NFT collections, I think, at this point. It's really fun, really interoperable. And, that's the ethos that we try to maintain in here. It's like, what are the cool things about Web3 that make it better, more unique? And, how can we continue to build those experiences for our users?
So it's really a home for NFT for all kinds of avatars across different chains and everything.
Yeah, yeah, it's become that. It's become like honestly a launch pad for a lot of NFT collections now too, because we have so many users. If people want attention for their NFT collection, getting integrated into Pixels is a really good way to get visibility for their NFT collection. And that's an interesting side effect of it being so social and visible. And yeah, those are the key things that we look for inside of Web3. Like it's not just that avatar stuff that we're doing. We're doing interoperability with other tokens. We're doing a lot on the incentive design systems. So yeah, that's like one route that's been quite interesting though.
Very cool. So one of the things that struck me was that you believe in, and a lot of people are going to disagree with you because they're dopamined up, but you believe in gradual decentralization, right? So what is that in a world where everybody wants everything yesterday?
Yeah, so I think we're still way earlier in Web3 than a lot of people think, where we're still in a basically searching for what practically works inside of Web3. And there's a lot of consideration that you need to have when you're actually building a Web3 application, especially when you start to insert incentives into the equation. If you've ever played an MMO, you kind of know how this story goes. A lot of the times where a lot of MMOs struggle with gold farming or people trying to break economy. And Web3 applications are essentially facing the same problems when they hit scale, maybe even 10 times worse because the incentives are there in even more magnitude. And the friction to enter some of these games are even lower, especially if they're fully on chain. Like you don't even need to log in sometimes if you just want to interact with the smart contract directly, right? So there's a lot of work that needs to be done when it actually comes to managing economy, managing incentive design, real user identification, segmentation, targeting of rewards, all of this, where if you do this fully on chain, I think it maybe slows down the progress to actually figure out what works. I think in like 5 to 10 years, when leaders like us in the space have kind of figured out the stack that works, the methods that work, built some more of the infrastructure off chain that can get moved on chain. But right now, there's still too much to like figure out, in my opinion, to have everything fully on chain because you need to change it quite quickly if you have it.
I remember when I used to build systems, if they put everything in the code, it slowed everything down, you
Hmm.
know? So everything, so building it agilely makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So you believe, or no, I don't know if you believe this, that blockchain games can monetize at magnitudes that are far greater than traditional games, right? Is that true or false? And how can you help your players capitalize on that assumption?
Yeah, there's certainly potential there. I think the reason why blockchain gaming is maybe interesting is there's potential for more efficient ad spend or reward distribution and potentially really, really interesting unlocks on the user acquisition side. And then the other side too is there's potentially better monetization or the monetization looks a little bit different than it would inside of a Web2 game, which is potentially more effective as well. So this is the area where, people start actually proving this out. And this is the stuff that we're working on right now. I think that really is kind of the point when you can say Web3 gaming is it's not completely figured out, but it works. It's, completely valid, at least when it comes to building a game. And yeah, we're still so early in the space. No one's quite proven out like the fundamentals of this, but that's what we're shooting towards basically. So here's an example of monetization, for example. Web3 monetization and Web2 monetization can look a little bit different. For example, in Web2, you're always spend focused, right? And you kind of want to extract the value out of users as much as possible. The interesting part about Web3 monetization is there's kind of a similarity in terms of the economics of a Web3 ecosystem of having a user spend a token versus also just having them not sell it. So there's some interesting mechanics that you might be able to introduce inside of a Web3 game, like not staking, but things that might resemble staking in terms of gameplay. So, for example, we're about to introduce mechanics that are like upgrades, where you put tokens into the game and you can downgrade it. You can get the upgrade back, basically. Maybe we take like a small 10% fee. But essentially, what that does is it creates higher spend per user because the user doesn't necessarily feel like the money's going away or the token's going away, right? So then it's on us to basically, keep them into the game or keep them into the system. And then when it comes on the other side, when it comes to like cost per install or customer acquisition cost, this is where we're innovating the most. Most of the big Web2 gaming companies in the casual or mobile game space, they are the biggest companies because they have basically discovered huge competitive advantages when it comes to, CPI or retention inside of their games. So essentially, they can get a higher LTV out of their users because the users that they're targeting when it comes to performance marketing are more of the right types of users. What we've been working on is essentially a different piece of that stack. I like to call it direct to consumer rewards, where essentially what we're trying to figure out is when we target users on the top level, how can we make sure that these users stay inside of the game and stay inside of the ecosystem? And can we actually convert them into net spenders as well too? And what that basically looks like for us is, we have a huge reward budget through the token. that we get to give out every single month. Our job is basically to give out this reward budget in the most efficient manner. And what that means is we want to basically give out tokens to people who are, eventually likely to spend, who are willing to share the game with their friends or their family, or who provide like other kinds of ecosystem value. So we've been doing a lot of work on basically the segmentation of users. What this means is identifying users in different types of categories, kind of bucketing them, labeling them, and then figuring out who the right people to give all of these incentives are, at what stage in the life cycle the right time to give an incentive is, and then what actual effect this incentive has on, the metrics that we care about, which are, retention, engagement, monetization. And we're asking questions like, what are the right ratios of different types of users to give out these incentives to? So I mean, yeah, the key thesis here is like, we do this, we actually even might be able to make play to earn work and be sustainable. I think in the long run, it maybe looks a lot like free to play monetization, where maybe 95% of your user base actually earns, because what you're doing is you're, instead of spending money on ads, just giving out that ad spend directly to users. And then, you still monetize about 5% of your users like a normal free to play game would. So yeah, there's experimentation there. If we pull this off, then it's a really big opportunity. That's kind of the exciting thing for us right now.
I'm trying to think here, about the games that I play and how I'm retained and sucked into the games that I play. Right. Um, One of them is Royal Match. It's a Web 2 game, but
Mm.
it's kind of like, what do you what do you do to retain your gamers? Because rewards work, but there's also other things that I'm thinking that you do. What do you do to keep them involved and engaged?
Yeah, so what those games are amazing at is like really digging into your psychology. They like put flashing lights in front of you. They try to give you dopamine boost. And I mean, I think that's what the end game of any casual game looks like, regardless of its Web3 or not. But that's not our focus early on. Like our focus is essentially more on the reward distribution and seeing if that's another powerful tool. I think in the long run, like all of these UA pieces of the UA stack merge together, right? Like at first I was like, oh, we don't need to do any performance marketing. We can just do bottoms up rewards. I think in the long run, a Web3 game will still have to run ads, but your ad spend maybe becomes more efficient because you're better at keeping these users in when you get the rewards. Same thing with like, okay, if you're optimizing like a normal free to play game and like digging more into the psychology and intrinsic stuff, that's great too. When you start to add incentives, it's probably like a 10x boost. So this incentive part is the part that we're focused on because it's going to be our biggest piece of competitive tech essentially. And this is where we have the most knowledge, like the most excitement to be working on it. But yeah, we're also bringing in talent right now that's basically going to help with this kind of stuff too. The current game that we have at Pixels is not optimized at all when it comes to retention, spend, any of this stuff. And it's okay because we haven't needed to be. But now we're kind of moving and shifting to the phase where if we want to start to prove out the real economics of Web3 gaming, we have to do that.
Cool. So let's talk about economics and incentives. Your players are able to generate resources, right? Uh, what is that like, and what are the benefits to resource generation?
Yeah, I mean, so it's like any MMO right now. If you've ever played Diablo, I think our economics are really, really similar to Diablo, where you have to kind of grind to get certain resources. The rarer the resources, the higher you level up, the more rare the resources that you get. And people have to basically get some of these resources and trade with others if they don't have the ability to get them themselves. So yeah, we can kind of set the economic base with the pixel token too. We have this really interesting mechanic called the task board. And the task board is basically a lot of the like tech that we've been building out and all the data that we've been getting to on reward distribution. So when you play the game, you gather resources and you can turn them in for either the soft currency called coins that's completely off chain, or you get a random chance of getting a pixel task, our token. And a lot of the work that we've been doing is essentially like the random assignment of different rewards to users algorithmically based on different criteria that we have on them. So, for example, if they buy a VIP pass, it's like a battle pass that we sell, they'll get more of these rewards given to them. But what this also does is it basically gives like a, value to the resources that they're gathering because they can turn them in for this token that has, the ability to be swapped on an exchange, right? So what that allows is like it basically creates this whole economic base where it's like, okay, if I get these resources that aren't even directly related to the pixel tasks, or if I just get this resource that somebody else can turn in for a pixel task, there's value associated with it now. So it's like slightly extrinsically motivated right now, but it doesn't quite matter. Like the important part is that we're building the economic base, and then we're able to analyze reward distribution with this and the effects of rewards as well.
I've liked what I've heard so far. You're working on the economics, you're doing assets, NFTs, everything is coming together. Um, and community. I want to talk about community because at the same time the NFTs were hot in 2021, so was the metaverse. This concept of the metaverse, at least. What is your vision for a true working metaverse, and why are shared experiences important?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I was working on the metaverse product before I moved into Web3. Like that's the best description of the thing that I was doing before. It was spatial video chat. We were trying to sell to enterprise companies, and I tried working in that space for so long. My key findings from working in that space was that we were trying to sell events to people, or we were trying to sell these spaces to people. We saw very little usage in virtual spaces from people that we were selling to unless they had like a reason to be there. So the best use case that we typically saw was that there were some groups that were organizing a weekly meetup in these spaces that we gave to them. But the key lesson there was actually like you really need a shared goal. You really need like a shared activity to form community. If you just have a space to hang out and chat, it's not like very compelling to be using these spaces. And honestly, the preference, if that's the only activity or the only shared or common goal, is to meet in person when you can, right? Like if you are just chatting, it's not the best, right? Or people prefer async or like other forms of communication. But when you actually have something to work towards together, like a game or something like that, community forms. And that's the cool thing about Pixels. Pixels has become a really solid community of communities because what we've been trying to do is we've been trying to basically give groups of people common tasks to work towards and also compete against too. It's like community building, it's not like cultish, but like, having a shared goal, a shared idea to work towards, and also a common enemy. It creates like some fun competition. It creates like a good like bond between people. And yeah, that's where gaming comes in my mind. Like I think if you want to actually have a metaverse that's effective, you need those kinds of mechanics inside of the metaverse.
I definitely think you do. One of the interesting things about your game, because it covers so much, you have resources, you have all that. Um, can it be a catalyst? How do you see it as being a catalyst to a variety of generations, both old folks and teenagers, and coming together to have fun and break down generational barriers? Because generational barriers are still an issue in this industry.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I don't think people understand that gamers are typically an older crowd than people realize, especially casual gamers as well too. I don't know, maybe when like 20 years ago, right, the gaming crowd skewed younger, but like all those people grew up and they still play games. So yeah, it's interesting because our demographics are skewing a bit older than people might think. It's like 30 to 50 is, I think, the median age range. And yeah, a lot of them are onboarding like younger family members, things like that. It's been cool to see that. And yeah, I think that's kind of what we're trying to move towards next as well too. Like we want to bring on more casual game experiences. Like one thing that we did very differently early on than other Web3 games was we chose a casual setting, audience, game experience. And in 2021, early 2022, when you saw Web3 games raised, they were like all so hardcore and like not very appealing to like a general audience, like drug references and things like that. And it's like, if you're trying to onboard millions of people, that's probably not the right route to go. Like you want to make something that appeals to a lot more people. So that's always been kind of the thesis here too. Like we want to onboard a wide variety of demographics. We want like a more casual experience. We don't even allow swearing in the Discord, which people really don't like, but that was something that was very weird for Web3 early on. So that's important.
One of the things I noticed from some of the early Web3 games like Axie Infinity was you had a whole bunch of Filipinos, teenagers making millions of dollars, right? So um, you had a high level of energy. How do you capture that high level of energy and bring it into your into your ecosystem?
Yeah, I think a lot about how we can help create good experiences for like creators to like make more content essentially. So it's cool because we have a lot of Pixels native creators. And yeah, the easiest thing that we can do to help them is give them more things to like share with other people essentially. Because that creates an amazing energy. Like there's this one player in the game, her name is Zambina. She has like this weekly series that she does where she like walks around Terravilla, like our town square, and like goes on random adventures and makes like these like really cute like kind of role playing type of content. And that kind of energy is pretty contagious. Like we see people like mock her content style sometimes now, and she's kind of led that. And then we have other creators that do similar things too. So that's what I think about a lot. It's like, how do we enable our community to be the leaders in that? And how do we essentially, when we see emergent behavior like that, create systems that help that even better? So when I see a content creator doing something like that, or somebody who's really enjoying a certain area, I look and see, is there like another area of product that we can build that maybe like makes this 10 times better for them, or is like actually a part of the game? That's kind of what we look for. It's like where the energy is, we want to build it, basically.
That's smart. I like that. Um, so I want to ask you about this, about towards regarding your entrepreneurial journey, regarding, there's a lot of people out there right now who know the future is uncertain. Don't know what's going to happen, later on this year with elections, or later on this year with the macroeconomic environment or inflation, whatever. How can people, whether entrepreneurs or workers, begin to, I say, embrace and dance with uncertainty? Because I know you've done that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the trait that you need most as an entrepreneur, to be completely honest. And that is the hard part about it. You basically never know what's going to happen, and you have to become very uncomfortable with basically not knowing. Like, early, I didn't get myself a paycheck for like 2 years, and that was pretty stressful. Didn't know like if I was going to be able to always like pay rent the next month, things like that. And that's not like not everybody needs to do that. Like the entrepreneur does not always need to struggle in that capacity. But what I'm trying to say is essentially like that uncertainty is something that you become more comfortable with, or if you can't become comfortable with it, you'll probably burn out. So that is kind of the job of being an entrepreneur. You see uncertainty, and your job is to deal with it. And the people that are able to deal with it better are typically the ones that like last longer. Also, yeah, the job of the entrepreneur is also just to not quit. It's it's not easy. But you have to stay in the game as long as you can too, because I was working on stuff for like 2 years that basically went nowhere. And it's really common. Like I think this is kind of the artist journey, the entrepreneur journey. You have to wait for your chance to come too. Like the longer that you can't lose if you don't quit, basically.
It's kind of like that video where you get to the 1 yard line after you drove 99 yards, and then you say, okay, well, I'm done now. But no, you're close to punching it in the end zone. You got to stick with it, right?
Mhm.
Um, awesome. So I want to thank you very much for your time today. I enjoyed speaking with you. This has been a fun conversation. I do have a final question. How can people find out more information about you, about Pixels, about what you guys are up to? How can they play your game? How can they do any of that?
Yeah, so my personal Twitter is at what's Luke doing. The official Pixels Twitter or X account is at pixels_online. You can go and play the game at pixels.xyz. And yeah, our token is listed on Binance.
That's awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This is fun.